So I made some notes, but I think we'll just free
Yeah,
form this
sure.
conversation because I think it turns out more natural and a little bit better.
Yeah.
So Alex S. Johnson, and I do notice you go by a bunch of names.
This is true. This is true.
You have a lot of different identities, and if so, do you
Yeah.
mind sharing what they are and why?
Okay. Well, thank you for that question, Belinda. Also, it's an honor and a pleasure to be interviewed by you. You're a legend. You're a true, icon of our, whatever you want to call it. Whatever like goddess, the beat, what Mark Homestead calls post beat, I guess, right? Our literary community, and you do gas, which is something that I also do I call it collective paw, which is actually comes from a line in an Ellen Mabie poem, Whiff of Wonder. But you asked me specifically about my various identities, and well, there's some very, very interesting stories that connect the identities with the larger project that I'm creating. It's a kind of a movement in a way. I had some friends who did a comic strip called Bork Cheeto, Occult Doggo Detective. And I love this strip, Belinda. You have to check this out. I think the comics are still available online. And so this introduced me to doggo speak. And so, for instance, Bork is like bark, right? But they have their own speech because, dogs have their own dialect of English. And small, SMOL, is is a very variant spelling of small in doggo speak. So it's a reference to, 2016 meme speak to be, to shorthand it. And then, so when I, I'm an only child, like I said, and we grew up I was raised until I was about 4 or 5 years old in Berkeley, California, which is, we lived across the street from People's Park. And we have an interesting connection with that as well. The the poet was known as the Bubble Lady. Help me out. The Bubble Lady, right?
My mind says I don't know. I'm not
Okay,
sure.
so it was a mentor of Jan Steckel, right?
Mm-mm.
You don't know Jan Steckel? Okay. Oh, you need to meet Jan. She's a wonderful bisexual poet. She's a winner of the Lambda Literary Award and a wonderful, wonderful human being.
Uh,
Um,
can I
yeah,
ask
go ahead.
you, so sometimes do you identify as trans or bi or all of
Y-
it? I mean,
Yes,
it's
yes, yes,
personal, but
yes.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for the question. So yeah, so the I had this character called Candy Fontaine, which began about 2014 and 2015, and I've had a number of kind of trans, or I didn't really specifically think of them as trans at the time. I just thought of them as sort of alter egos, but Candy Fontaine's Slutty Detective was something that I came up with. And I didn't realize at the time that it was until I was recently reminded by my good friend Ken Goffman, aka Are You Serious, of founded Mondo 2000 magazine, that Slutty Detective is actually a line from Kathy Acker, and it comes from the novel Empire of the Senseless, which came out from Grove Press, and I believe 1988. And so, to make a long story short, I'm a huge admirer and fan of, Kathy Acker and William S. Burroughs, and I put out the third installment of our William S. Burroughs tribute anthology called The Junk Merchants, which had the contributors were just we'll get into that later, but Candy Fontaine is a long-running character of mine and is kind of a trans femme, monster, you know. She's an anti-hero. She's a rebel. She's an outlaw. She's occasionally transforms into literally a kaiju monster.
And so
And, you know,
Candy
yeah.
is like a character you write about, but it is a character you identify with as well.
Yeah, I mean, it was a yeah, it was a really interesting question, Belinda, because I gradually realized that I had always written from a female point of view, and that was not an accident. In fact, I thought back and in 2005, there was there was a major BDSM erotica anthology that came out from Penguin Random House, or actually, it was a division called Berkeley Books, right? And that had it was called Master Slave. And in this anthology, which I shared with the likes of Patrick Califia, I actually wrote a foreword to my story, which is called Live Transmission, when I explained that the character was a point of view character that was a female that I identified with. And so looking back, also because of my close friendship with, trans pioneers like Billy Martin, aka Poppy Z. Bright, Caitlin R. Kiernan. Yeah, I published them numerous times. They've quoted me and they've blogged my work as well as Patrick Califia. I've been published alongside Kate Bornstein, Carol Queen, Thomas Roche, etc., and Jan Steckel as well. So I just realized that it was all pointing in the same direction that I identified as a trans femme.
Well,
So
let me just say something. I hope it's
sure.
not kooky or anything,
No, go
but
ahead.
even though you're talking like you're identifying with female, but you're a rather handsome man and
Oh,
manly
thank you
man.
so much.
So you don't feel the need to look like a woman.
Well, it's thank you so much. That's beautiful. That's a beautiful thing to say. Thank you so much. Wow, that's so cool. Okay. Just whatever. I'm not blushing. Well, okay, so one of the things about I don't think that it's commonly known or understood. Trans is a very, very complex. It's not just not monolithic. There are all kinds of trans, and I actually learned about this by from people like Lasara Firefox, Allen. These are some of the people that you might want to have on your show. Um, Lasara is a beautiful trans, non-binary trans person. So, and also uh, Lyric Lark Rivera, aka Neurodivergent Rebel, who is a contributing author to my books and my anthologies, as well as they endorsed me, my work, and sort of reading their work and try and understanding that non-binary means above, you know, transcendental of binary. So you can be both. I mean, you can identify both as a man as a woman, and it's sort of the do you know Susie Bright?
Sorry, these genres are a little not my norm, so I don't
Oh, okay.
really know.
Well, I mean, I think of it all as kind of part of the same network of associations. Susie Bright, aka Susie Sexpert, um, is a sex expert and erotica writer based in San Francisco, and was a advisor on the film Bound. Well, it's both. I mean, I don't know if I can use the term, but gender fuck is basically what the term that Susie Bright came up with to describe, a kind of a mentality where there is no there are sharp visual, and I guess associative uh, um, associative kind of identifications with. So you say, well, you said very, very, very flattering thing about me about my appearance. And as a trans person, I accept both. I don't say, well, if I were a woman. Now, there are people who suffer from what's called gender dysphoria, and they feel very, 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 very uncomfortable with what they see in the mirror. If I had gender dysphoria, for example, then I would look in the mirror and say, and see something that I didn't identify with. I would see a man with, facial hair and so forth, and I would say, I don't want that. I want to conform, or my facial characteristics and my, my voice, for instance, is very deep, that I would w wish to alter those to reflect how I feel about myself, but I have gender euphoria, which is totally different. I
Well,
mean,
this is so interesting to me.
thank you.
You've taught me some stuff here. So
Wow.
this is a probably may not be appropriate, but where we're talking along this line, are you
Yeah.
attracted to all sexes, or just it's very personal? It depends on
Well,
that different
that's a
times.
it's a very interesting question, and I just don't want to be boxed in, and sometimes
Mm,
I don't feel interested in sexuality at all, I just
okay.
want to focus on the spirit, you know. I just feel that we're too caught up in, the flesh as it is, and
Yes.
the you know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean, right? Like, so as a goddess person, I see the goddess as, what trifold, but also, a man and woman, male and female, and non-binary in the sense that, God or goddess is, Shiva Shakti, that kind of yin yang, I mean, you of all people know what I'm talking about. So, yeah, so it's a very beautiful thing. And I just want to embrace everybody. And I just want people to understand that you don't have to feel bad about yourself. One of the reasons I want to represent to people that, you know, that to not be afraid of saying, you know, don't be afraid of these words. And if you have questions, just ask. You know what I mean? The worst thing is keeping silent because you're afraid that you're gonna, embarrass somebody, or they'll, whatever, or you'll, you know, commit a faux pas, or a gaffe or something. The truth is that, transgender people are just people, and I have been very, very fortunate to know some, remarkable human beings that I consider longtime friends that are also transgender and, pioneers in that area. So really, and there's a close connection between, I mean, you say that you're not familiar with these genres. There is a quite a bit of a connection between the beat generation, the beat adjacent writers. You're a national beat poet laureate, right?
Texas.
Of Texas, right? And so I good friends with, people like Ron Whitehead and Ellen Mabey, who is not, you know, who's kind of transcendent I mean, if anybody should be, you know, elected like queen of the beats, it would be Ellen, right? I mean, she's so amazing. And
I think I'll ask her for an interview.
yeah, you really should. She's so delightful. She's so brilliant and unassuming and modest, and she'll giggle a lot,
Oh,
right?
can I ask you something? And thank you very much for this conversation so
Of
far.
course, of course,
Uh,
yeah.
I want to ask you some couple of things in my notes.
Yeah.
You were secretary and assistant to Tom Sullivan,
Yeah, that's correct.
editing his New York Times best-selling memoir, Seeing Lessons.
That's correct. Yeah.
Is there something more you could tell me about that? How did you get
Um,
big like that?
okay, well, that is an incredible story, and I'm really glad you asked. I'm really glad you brought that up, Glenda, because Tom Sullivan was instrumental in giving me a kind of a endorsement for my career. And what that was so in about 2003 or so, I was a senior secretary at a place called EDA, Electronic Data Associates in Torrance, California. Is my head in the frame? I'm always worried that it's going to dip
You're
below
good.
the. Okay, cool. Well, Tom Sullivan, as I mean, people may not be as familiar with the name now as they were back in the 70s and 80s, but for your viewers, and just to sort of catch you up, Tom Sullivan is one of the most acclaimed disabled people on the planet. His work, I mean, his awards include, two nominations for an Emmy Award. He was his book, If You Could See What I Hear, was the basis of a major motion picture. He's performed at the Super Bowl. He sung the national anthem at the Super Bowl. He was a journalist with Good Morning America. He was a friend of Martin Luther King Jr. and Muhammad Ali. He was regularly appeared on shows like Mork and Mindy with Robin Williams, and they created entire characters on shows like MASH or WKRP in Cincinnati just to accommodate having him on the show, pretty much playing himself.
How did you get the gig of editing him?
Well, that's a really good question. So I was the senior secretary at this firm, which was actually run by a Republican, believe it or not. And Tom is a Republican, but I don't think he's a common Republican. He's a really brilliant guy. He's a Harvard educated, scholar. And I believe it was English. I'm not sure. But so w- you know, when I signed on, to be a secretary, I wasn't making like a lot of money, but it was a really prestigious gig. So I was like, balance, making what, $13 an hour, but you're working with, I soon discovered two of their clients were, you know, one of them was Betty White, right? The Betty White. And so, people, like Betty White, it was just would call up and I would do their transcription, right? So this is, hi, this is Betty. And I'm saying, oh my God, trying to, you know,
Right. Yeah.
dial down the
Cool.
anxiety,
That'd be cool.
right? It's like, oh my God, I'm not worthy. Um, I'm talking to an absolute icon. And he would give her dictation, and you're good. You're a good secretary when you can recite back to Betty White, who had a mind like a steel trap, and everything she would catch any single word. I changed one word in her transcription because foolishly I thought having a master's degree in English that, I knew what word she wanted. And she said, change it back, Alex. I was so like, oh my God. But is it even an honor to be corrected, to be schooled by Betty White, because you have the story, right, for the rest of your life. Betty White schooled me and spanked my ass. So I said, okay, Betty, I'm sorry. And she said, just change it back. And that was it. But Tom used to call all the time, and we he is a very unique person. He is blind since birth, so he is I think he was, is deprived of oxygen for some reason in the womb, and so he was born blind, and then his eyes were removed. It's called enucleation, so that they wouldn't bother him or whatever. And he has, glass eyes. And he used to call, and I would do his transcription, basically, you know, he would, they used a, digital, recording service, right? So I would dial up his transcription, his dictation rather, and I would accurately transcribe it, and then he would call up, and I would read it back to him. this is what we did back in the day before they had whatever AI or whatever. And he started asking me questions because he'd been talking to the owner, Marjorie Judge, of the firm EDA, and she knew that I was a writer, and I'd already had work in, alongside really legendary authors. And so she told Tom, and he said, "So I understand from Marjorie that you're a writer." I said, "Yeah." And he said, "I bet you want to write for Playboy." And I said, "Of course I do." And he said, "Okay, I've got a job for you." What is it, Tom? Well, I want you to edit this book that I'm transcribing. I was like, "Really? Okay." So, and Tom Sullivan, doesn't, doesn't make this. It wasn't an offer. It was a, you know, he told me to, He said, you're gonna edit my book." And I said, "Okay, that's a profound honor." He's like, "Shut up." Just, you know what I mean? Like the level of kind of pride and satisfaction knowing that you're at a, you're whatever I did, in a past life or, good karma or whatever, to merit, this full endorsement by somebody at his level. I mean, he's been a guest on Oprah Winfrey, that I thought, well, I did something right, goddess bless. So I took it on, and he would call me up and he would say, "Okay, Alex, tell me when I'm writing shit." I said, "Okay, I will," And we got into a sort of a pattern, it was a true collaboration. We would work, for hours on end, I'd be just dying for a smoke. I used to smoke. I would say, okay, after like 3 hours, I'd, he would dictate, right? I would pull it up, do the transcription, and then he said, okay, anything that if that language has got to be tight, man. So I want you to rewrite it. So I did. I always listen when I'm editing. I always listen for the music. And Hunter S. Thompson was always talk about, the music, right? I like the music. Listen to the music of the rhythm of the words. And if he said something where there was a factual error or he misquoted Shakespeare, I would just correct that, or I would fact check, something about like a bridge in Indonesia or something where he went bungee jumping. And I figured out, oh, that was actually he misnamed that bridge, and so I would correct that. So, you know, going along in, as I went, as I transcribed, I was also fact checking, right? So go on Google, whatever. And it turned into a true friendship, a true collaboration. And he actually invited me over to his house once, and I was sort of like, I have imposter syndrome, Belinda. I really never really believed that I was anything. And I've been in several abusive relationships. So, when people put you down and say you can't write or whatever, or, or you have teachers or whatever abusive and you're neurodivergent, like I am. I mean, I'm so neurodivergent. You wouldn't believe it. Though I guess the only person that I really matches me in neurodivergency is Ron Whitehead, right? I mean, whenever I've had him on the show, we go zing boing yo, quick, pew, like a Hunter S. Thompson bullet, wang. And so that's pretty much the story of how I got to work with Tom Sullivan.
So, oh, thank you. Did you start out writing horror, erotica, or and about what around what age were you?
Oh, really, really good question. So when I was about like 11, 12, 13, well, actually, I started writing when I was about 7. And I would read like Sherlock Holmes mysteries. I loved those. I loved Jules Verne. I loved H.G. Wells. Loved, you know, um, like there's like Ray Bradbury. Bram Stoker. I really loved adventure stories, like Edgar Rice Burroughs that was my cup of tea, Edgar Rice Burroughs, man, and Journey to the Center of the Earth, whatever, as well as those back in the 70s, you had those all those Disney movies, which are quite different from what is children's fare today. I mean, they did things like Escape from Witch Mountain or stuff. You could not have those movies today because you had child endangerment or whatever. But to me, it was thrilling. I loved those films and I loved adventure stories. Remember that one? It was about like this balloon, sort of like a Victorian dirigible, and they went to the North Pole and whatever, and there was like an elephant graveyard. I don't know. It was really fun. I loved all those films, and so I would read the novelizations as well. I read the entire children's section of my, library, where now I wound up back in Carmichael, California. That's where I live. And so I read the entire children's section and young adult section. And so I went to I was about 12 years old. I went to the children's librarian or whatever. I said, should you show me the adult section? Because I read all those books. And she said, okay, cool. Right. So I went to the adult section. And then I was looking for Edgar Rice Burroughs stuff. And there was a guy, William S. Burroughs, right next door in the adult section. I pulled out this book. It had a cover by Salvador Dali, who I love. And I said, wow, what's this? Naked Lunch, Naked Lunch, cover by Salvador Dali. Wow, what's inside this thing? Open it up. And I was just, it blew my little mind. I was just so, I thought, whatever he's doing, I want to do that because it was shocking. It was horrific. It was funny. It was mostly just funny. And I was just like in hysterics, but I would sneak a little, you know, morsel of naked lunch, right? Like for a long time, I was like, I don't know if I want my mom to know I'm reading this, whatever it is. It seemed forbidden. But it had endorsements from people like Norman Mailer on the back. And so I was like, well, Norman Mailer is, a legit writer. William S. Burroughs must be, a big deal. And so that was my first kind of taste of what I wound up doing.
Did you ever have
And
a brush with him, like be in the same publication or any
um,
correspondence? Obviously.
no, no, I mean, I mean, up until very, very recently, I would never have thought of doing such a thing. I mean, being good friends with Ron Whitehead and, Mark Olmsted, Richard Modiano, and you know all these people who were good friends of his, but now, right? And well, Billy Martin, Poppy Z. Bright was a friend of Hunter S. Thompson, but you know I never met them, and I had dreams for years that I was friends with Burroughs, but okay, so yeah,
Well, my closest brush was I used to have a magazine called Gypsy in the 80s, and
yeah,
second edition had an interview with him and a photograph by Gregory Stevenson, who was living in Denmark. And I think
nice.
at that time in the 80s, Burroughs was actually living in that country. And so that it wasn't direct, but it was there, sort of, kind of.
Yeah. You're right. Sort of, kind of. Well, so I did meet R. Crumb. I mean, so my dad, Stephen M. Johnson, you should have him on the show. He's kind of deaf, but I'll try to convince him to have, he's just really a font of knowledge. He went to school at Yale he studied with Harold Bloom, and he studied art with Joseph Albers of the Bauhaus School. So my dad was a big influence on me. We always had like Shakespeare around the house. We always had classical literature. We had Chaucer, and he introduced me to the work of Allen Ginsberg. And then he took me to and also my dad worked for the Whole Earth Review, or the Whole Earth, whatever you called it, Coevolution Quarterly Software Review. Yeah.
Software?
Yes,
I
it was called
remember a Whole Earth catalog back in the 70s,
exactly. Yeah,
which was like how to do everything to survive
exactly.
something.
Yeah,
Is it related to that at all?
absolutely. It was founded by Stuart Brand, and it was taken over by, I think it was edited at some point by Kevin Kelly and then Howard Rheingold. And it was so for many, many years, it was just it was, we used to get it because my dad was regularly featured in there, and they would also regularly feature people like, Burroughs, Kathy Acker, Gary Snyder, all the cats, right? Allen Ginsberg. And so my dad was also, he did a cartoon for the Berkeley Barb back in the 60s, or, which became legendary. It was a satire of Ronald Reagan. And so my dad was in the Berkeley Barb. And so we're kind of counterculture, I'm from Berkeley, and my great grandfather, this is another really interesting connection, talking about the beats and poetry and so forth. My great grandfather was a guy named Herbert Eugene Bolton, and he was the founder of the Bancroft Library at UC Berkeley. And he was probably one of the most important, not only American historians, but one of the most influential and important historians who ever lived. He's the guy who came up with the idea that, you know what, it's not all about the Plymouth Rock and the Mayflower and the white people, it's about, hey, it's about the Mexicans, it's about the borderlands, it's about, our very complex, what do you call it when there's a term that I associate with feminism and civil rights, where everything is interconnected, or
Eco? No, no.
well, yeah, ecofeminism is one aspect of it. And so I think, people like Burroughs was always talking about how the planet is kind of like a spaceship, right? And people keep poking holes in the hull. And so eventually we're just going to have to evolve out of our body suits and into new forms, So, um, and I think that the Stuart Brand, right? He was Stuart Brand. He was one of the Merry Pranksters, and he was the guy who saw the NASA photograph of the Earth from space and made that profound connection with the help of some hashish.
Uh,
He was on a train, right? And he was feeling no pain, right? He had a ball of hashish, and he took it, and he was looking at this photograph that had just come out from NASA. And he thought, aha, I need to do something like this about this, this new vision, right? Gaia, right? It's the goddess as planet, system. And so he founded Whole Earth Catalog, access to tools. And that was the start of something that became blossomed into what we now know as cyberspace, the internet. All these things were kind of the product of people like William Burroughs, John Shirley, who was a mentor of mine as well. Is the guy who wrote the movie The Crow, the original Crow, and invented cyberpunk, that genre, with people like William Gibson, and then my friend Ken Goffman, aka Are You Serious? You should also. I think Ken Goffman is a true kind of cyberculture pioneer, and very much up your alley.
hmm.
So I really recommend. I can introduce you if you don't know Ken already. Um, you would really get along famously. So I'm really going way astray of your question.
Well, let me ask you another question. Tell me about
Okay.
Nocturnicorn Books. If
Yeah.
and correct me if I mispronounced
No,
that. And
that's a
about
yeah.
when you started doing that and and you say it's genre defying, but
Yeah.
also tell me something about your editorial philosophy. Oh,
Okay, good question. I want to know about yours too. The As an editor, my job is, I believe, to um kind of cut away the underbrush, cut away everything that is kind of cloaking the the bones, if you will, the bones of the story. If it's nonfiction, then I want to be able to, I think, Hunter S. Thompson in Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, that was one of the most powerful opening sentences in the history of literature, English literature. We're somewhere near Barstow on the edge of the desert when the drugs begin to take hold. It's it's the five W's, right? It's who, what, when, and where, you know. And he did it so well that people only think of he was on drugs, right? They don't think he did this, he encapsulated like Americana in this one sentence. He encapsulated journalism in this one sentence, and he also was kind of riffing off it, and he was also satirizing it, in one sentence, right? Well, I'm looking for that. I did study investigative journalism at UCLA briefly, and I want to uncover, I also have a master's degree in literature, and I want to uncover the bones. I want to find the bones. Was it Goldberg something about writing the bones? Was it, what
there
I'm
was a
talking
book, Writing the Bones, I think.
about? Right, writing the bones, yeah. And I think everybody can write. I don't believe in the myth of you know, it's always a man, right? It's always and this is kind of something that was a kind of a function of the kind of the solitary genius, and I believe in collaboration. I think, a lot of the stories that come out, in my anthologies, and people will never know how much they were, passed between my different authors. You get some notes here. I won't name names because, that's none of anybody's business, but I say, okay, you could tighten that up here, right? Pass it to another writer, boom. So really, in a collective paw kind of way, it becomes a true collaboration, and everybody's working together to get exactly the right words. And so I believe in collaboration. I believe that you don't have to compromise. You just have to kind of, every once in a while, you have to say, okay, that's the right thing. That's the right note to hit for this story, right? That's the right, that's what's good for this poem. This what's good for this nonfiction article is a specific word, a specific phrase, punctuation, whatever it happens to be. And I want to give a shout out to my assistant editor, Natasha Lynn Nichols of Divine Fire Astrology. So she's very, very good. And I just recently met her through the Elder Goss forum on Facebook. And it's a long story, so I won't
I'm
get,
still
yeah,
reverberating in my head is the collective Paul. I really liked that.
the collective
Oh,
Paul.
yeah.
Yeah, the
Working,
collective.
collaborating. A Paul is saw. I mean, you think of it as anyway. It just hit right for me. So
Well, yes, the phrase originated. Well, okay, so at some point I'm going to tell you my love story with Ellen maybe. So maybe I should start with that, and then
oh, okay, do tell.
okay, so it's a purely platonic, but so I was working at as a composition instructor at Cal State Dominguez Hills in Carson, California, and about 2010. And my co-instructor was a woman named Melissa Williams, and we co-taught a summer course in composition. Basically, we had a cohort of students from a local high school who were the the top 30th percentile of students in that particular community, but they needed to be brought up to speed because this is a very low socioeconomic, very primarily Latino community. And this is not to say anything bad about Latinos. In fact, that's why I went to Cal State Dominguez Hills and got my master's degree because, and actually in I my MA thesis was on Gloria Anzaldúa. And so I believe in that we need to really shift the paradigm and we need to go beyond this, the myth of the white colonialist, master of everything. And so so as I said, I was working there and yeah, go ahead.
Excuse me, but is it a myth? I mean, there's certainly one way you can see it really strongly,
Yeah.
but proceed. Go ahead.
Okay. Okay. And we can, come back to that. I'm really interested in your perspective. So it was my co-instructor, Melissa Williams, said, "Hey, Alex, you like poetry, right?" I was like, "Yeah, maybe. I like some poetry. I mean, like Byron or whatever. Nikki Giovanni, is awfully good." And she said, "Well, there's somebody I think you should meet. Her name is Ellen Mabey." And I said, "Oh, that's an interesting name, right? Isn't maybe as in, I might or I might not. Yeah, maybe, right? Ellen is in, and it's Ellen with a Y too, which is not her real name. I think I don't know if people know that it's a punk rock name.
I would guess that maybe wasn't a real name. I've always sort of thought that was it.
It's like, okay, so at some point, I don't know if I told you about this, but I actually befriended Terry Lee Chrome, the co-founder of the Runaways, with Joan Jett, and her name is also obviously an invention. I think of, you know, Ellen was, part of the original punk rock scene, with people like Exene Cervenka, Henry Rollins, Iris Berry, I mean, I've had two emails with Henry, but I am good friends with Iris Berry and Ellen Mabey. Anyway, so Melissa said, "Hey, there's this woman you need to meet. Her name is Ellen Mabey, and she's really shy and she giggles a lot." I said, "Wow, that sounds interesting." Okay. So I thought, well, how do I get in touch with her? Just look her up on Facebook, right? So I did. Within like a day, right? We were talking back and forth. It was just unbelievable. I said, "Hey, Ellen, my friend Melissa Williams thinks you're, the cat's PJs, right? Which of your," and she's like, "Oh, thank you very much." Right? She says I make her sound like Kermit the Frog. And I'm like, well, but she likes that. Okay, so, um, because she likes Kermit.
Mm.
Right. And so I said, okay, so Ellen, which of your books that you recommend? She said, well, people like Dancing Barefoot in the Glassblowers Museum. I thought, wow, that's the best title ever, right? Dancing Barefoot in the Glassblowers Museum. And so I bought a copy off of Amazon. I started reading it. Belinda, oh my God. This is like it was like reading Blake for the first time or reading Ginsberg for the first time. I couldn't believe it. It was so brilliant. And I was like, told my dad, that this woman is sort of like the female Allen Ginsberg, but she's funny
Hmm.
too. And so my dad and I, we've always had a very close relationship. We still do. We would go down to like Pete's Coffee and we would sit down and we would read Ellen maybe out loud to each other. And this led to one of my closest friendships for over a decade. We've we've when I've had her on the show, we've had marathon sessions where on Zoom that lasted the first time, I kid you not, 9.5 hours. And the only reason that we stopped was because she said, "Alex, I think I forgot to eat."
Well, was that recorded?
It was recorded. The whole thing was recorded. Yeah.
Posted all?
It was posted. Yeah, I posted it.
Oh,
But I don't edit like because I don't have time, I'm always trying to do more stuff, new stuff.
well,
So
I totally identify with that. I've got 40 balls in the air all the time.
Yeah,
I only very little bit edit, like if I'll turn on the recording and there'll be some other things go on before we actually start, that goes
right.
away. And maybe if I repeat something twice in a row or something, I might cut
Yeah,
them out, but it's nothing serious.
yeah.
And I actually like free form talking, and I see that you seem to also, and I felt comfortable enough to ask you those questions
Thank
earlier
you. Thank
because
you for that.
I'm just open for learning,
Yeah,
and
me too.
I don't jump to any. I try not to be judgmental on anybody. I mean, I'm sure I catch myself sometimes. Some things I don't identify with, but that doesn't mean I don't respect someone's.
Yeah, right.
Because we can't understand everything about the world if we don't live it.
Exactly. Yeah.
But it's exciting. I wish more people were like just wanting to learn and to not in order to use it in some way, but to understand.
I think that's very important, and I'm an educator as well. So, as you know, I've been talking about that, but and that's something that we share with Ellen too, because she, for the last, I don't know how long, since COVID, she's been one of the most reclusive people that I know, and she's very enigmatic. I mean, as close as we are, there's a lot of things that are just basic information about her that I don't know anything about her, and I totally respect that. I just like, well, there's certain things that I'm never going to ask her, you know, but but she takes a lot of Zoom classes right now. And that's actually funny because I had, I think it was like, was it Puma Pearl and was it Puma Pearl and Richard Modiano on my show recently? And they were, I think, or it was Mark Olmsted or, well, I get them, I do a lot of shows and I've had, Richard and Mark, on a lot.
Do you have them all
And
together? Or is it always one at a time?
well, I like to have, sometimes I'll have like I'm having Peaches Christ on Saturday. I think Saturday, yeah. But I like to have pairings, like Puma and Richard and or whatever Ellen maybe and Are You Serious or but yeah, so there was a question in there. Yeah.
Well, that's something I've been thinking about, having
Yeah.
a conversation with three people at a time or something. And it could be more, but I'm just thinking three is a good number, and
Yeah, it is.
just to have a sharing of various things. So in my notes, I have that you were an author at Penguin Random House.
That
Really?
is correct. Yeah, Penguin Random House. That is absolutely correct. Yeah. Um, Ask me about how I got into a book with Charles Bukowski. But yeah, so Penguin Random House. So I have a friend um, back in the actually back in the 80s. I knew this guy back in the 80s. His name is Thomas S. Roche. And I knew him as a local Sacramento guy. And he was the boyfriend of my then ex-girlfriend. Long story, but we became very good friends. I started collaborating on stories together. Is the only guy I knew, only person I knew who really wanted to be a writer as much as I did. And we pretty much followed the same trajectory. He moved to San Francisco. He got involved with sex education thing, and then with a lot of people like M. Christian, uh, Maxim Jakubowski, Lucy Taylor, Patrick Califia, Carol Queen, a lot of writers in the sort of erotica and BDSM world. And so because we've been
That
friend,
also something you identify with or have affinity to, the BDSM stuff? I know
yeah, I do. Yeah, I do.
a lot of people are. It's just not exactly in my
I know.
realm. Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing. I mean, I think what I would say is that what to kind of um to kind of there's a lot of misunderstanding about it, you know.
Probably.
And then right, probably. I think one of the major misunderstandings is that people who don't know about it think that it's confuse it with sadism or, masochism, and they're which are pathologies. And there is a lot of overlap too. But the key to understanding the BDSM world is I'm not a real active, I'm not, there are people who are just, it's a lifestyle thing and they call it lifestyle. I just identify with it. I think it's very exciting and pleasurable, but I don't think that, I would totally understand if people, turned off by it or that's not their thing. It's fine. I just want to disabuse people of some very, very common misunderstandings that it's about, hurting people. It's the opposite. A lot of people who are in the BDSM
Really,
community,
right? Isn't it? Is it truly about getting pleasure and just a little bit different than some kind of a ordinary way?
yeah, it is about a lot of people have been in abusive relationships. They've been traumatized. They're, sexually abused, psychologically abused. Um, and so in a way, BDSM is a form of psychotherapy where you can relive the same experiences but derive pleasure from it. And a lot of people become sort of, um, they call it trauma binding or, trauma binding, where you identify to the point of, identifying with your abuser, And so I think what BDSM in its best construction allows people to do is to take the same feelings of shame, humiliation, that they can't control, especially if you were sexually abused as a child, then you don't understand what these feelings are. You feel guilt, right? You think I caused it or I allowed this to happen to myself. And this is a lot of people like we're dealing with, Trump and all that, horrible situation with his victims or Epstein's victims or whatever. Not to get political, I don't want to get political, but that is certainly, part of the our current, um, you know, our current paradigm is monstrous. I think there's a lot of monstrosity going on, and a lot of you know acceptance, tacit acceptance of wildly inappropriate behavior at the highest level. And what I try to do is with my writing, I'm trying to flip the script so that I'm kind of mocking monstrosity. Characters like Candy Fontaine are monsters. I'm trying to expose, ex in a satirical way, I'm trying to expose the monstrosity that's almost become, common, is taken for granted. I want to say, in the best tradition of satire, like Jonathan Swift or William Burroughs, I want to say, this is horrible, this is horrible behavior, right? We should not accept it. And so it's complex, it's complex, but it as it's you know, people who are there's a lot of overlap with spirituality and BDSM and goddess and because it is really um, supposed to be all about trust. It's about power exchange. It's about pleasure, but also about transcendence. Transcendence of our limitations. With in pleasure, and I don't think that there's anything wrong with that as long as you have it's completely consensual.
Mm. Well, you're an education to me.
Thank you.
Back to the book though. Was it an anthology and you had a piece, or was it a book written by you,
Yeah,
Penguin?
it's I'll show you. Okay. Now, this is the book. I was good to see it.
What's it called? Master?
Master Slave. Okay, so you flip it around. It's a flip book, right?
Oh,
Boom, like that. Master Slave.
oh, so is it a
Um,
BDSM or something?
it is. It is. As a matter of fact.
And so
And
you had
so
so some of the writing is yours, not all of it.
no, I wrote one story.
Oh, so is it a fiction anthology about?
Yes, yes, yes. It is a fiction anthology, and it was edited by Thomas S. Roche, aka N.T. Morley.
Hmm.
He's no longer he's no longer a writer. He used to be a writer, quite prolific writer and anthologist. He's now working as a psychologist. So, which is interesting, right? And yeah, so it was a collection of, it was at the time in 2005 when it came out from Berkeley Books, there's a division of Penguin Random House. It was the most high profile BDSM erotica book that ever published and or anthology ever published. And it preceded the 50 Shades of Grey thing by many years. So it was actually a pioneering work, groundbreaking work. And I don't think it's ever been equaled in terms of, I don't think that a top five, publisher has ever put out anything so extreme before or since.
Oh, was Shades, 50 Shades of Grey, was that realistic in that world?
I did not read it. I heard just
Or see the movie?
horrible things. I haven't seen the movie. I think it may be on Tubi. I don't have any kind of subscriptions to anything, but Tubi is free. I think it might be on Tubi, um, which is a lot of fun. But um,
So you haven't seen it or read it?
I haven't seen it, so I can't comment on it. But
Oh,
I've heard that it was actually inspired by Twilight fan fiction. And it was written by what, a Mormon or something. It was just not realistic at all.
really? But you haven't seen it. Well, see, I don't, I
So
have
I
no
can't
idea. I'm not
talk
in
about
that
it.
world, but I dated a guy many years ago who was so excited about this club. You know, apparently was all that went on. He would just, well, he's trying to recruit me or something, and um, so but I no, I didn't get involved in any of that. And I had a friend who I guess was in that. It was a husband and wife, but they
Mhm.
met through some kind of sex club,
Oh, okay.
and he very much well, well, we talked some detail, but we didn't get nitty gritty.
Oh,
But
okay.
well, a little bit here and there. But it was
Mhm.
interesting. It's just interesting to hear.
Yeah.
Uh, it was more about. Nah, I can't talk. I can't go there. I don't. He's now deceased. So, but they were good friends of ours, and but they accepted us as being pretty boringly strict. Accepted them as being whatever they were. So
Whatever they were, that's all anybody could possibly ask, right?
yeah, on Sunday afternoons, do drumming together and
Oh,
have
cool.
snacks and burn incense and kind of get into a trance.
Sounds good.
We were just having fun,
I like that. I could dig that. Yeah.
you know. Um, well, this might be enough for our first meeting. Maybe we can talk
Cool.
sometime.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah. And I would love to have you on my show as well.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, it was
So
very nice meeting you, Alex.
very
And
nice meeting you, Belinda.
hey,
And the time just flew. How much did we
about an
spend?
hour. It's right.
About an hour. Wow. Uh,
Okay. Until next time, then. Bye bye.
Oh, bye. Bye-bye. Thank you.